Over 7 years of war in Syria have produced, at last count, 6 million internally displaced and 5.6 million registered refugees in the region. 3.5 million went to Turkey, that continues to be home to the world's largest refugee population, close to 4 million refugees. The 3-meter-high Syria Turkey wall dominates the Turkish town of Rehanli. It's a concrete, hard reminder of the war that Syrians are fighting just meters away. An emblem of the difficulties of a frontier nation that has to cope with refugees' humanitarian needs and walk the diplomatic tightrope of being on the doorstep of an international power struggle. Rehanli hosts a big community of Syrian refugees. We met Hussam at the care house he manages for wounded fellow countrymen. He himself arrived with a bilateral amputation 3 years ago.
We were rallying against the regime. It was Friday. I was with my friends. We were hit by shelling, perhaps by a tank or by precision-guided munitions. My legs were gone straight away.
6 years after the shelling, Hussam is back in the saddle after a remarkable recovery. At first, he made his own rudimentary limbs in Damascus. Then he came to Turkey to be fitted for proper prosthetics at the center run by the National Syrian Project for Prosthetic Limbs.
I started the training 2 years ago. At the beginning, it was very difficult. Little by little, it became easier. I felt I had to walk like common people do. I've managed to get to that, and now it's become easy.
Since 2017, the clinic has been financed by the EU Humanitarian Aid Department in partnership with Relief International. The aim is to improve access to specialized health services for conflict-affected Syrian refugees. The center was opened 5 years ago by doctors from the Syrian diaspora, and it's still run by Syrians.
Those who started the project came from different backgrounds. I was a maths teacher. 12 people had the chance to be trained in Ankara for 3 years. They became specialists in prosthetic limbs. Up to now, we've produced 6,500 different types of prosthetics.
The needs are high. Nevertheless, there's not enough data, as the country director of Relief International explains.
In Turkey, we don't know the burden of physical rehabilitation on this population. There was one study of a refugee populations in both Jordan and Lebanon that showed 60% of the sampled households had somebody with a physical disability. So if we extrapolate that finding to 3.5 million people in Turkey, we can imagine the needs are pretty great. Often these are invisible and hidden issues.
Nearly half of the Syrian refugees who settled in Turkey live today in the southeastern provinces bordering Syria. In Hatay province, where Rehanli is located, 27% of the population is Syrian, compared to a national average of 4%. We traveled to the provincial capital Antakya to understand how the EU is cooperating with the local government to assist refugees.
Matthias, what's been the impact of the Syrian conflict on the Turkish healthcare system?
Well, the Turkish healthcare system provides basic medical assistance to the refugees. But obviously, these refugees are heavily traumatized both psychologically but also physically. So this is where the EU can target its funding and have these experts try and assist these refugees with these very specialized healthcare needs.
And what's the long-term goal?
We're hoping that one day these kind of specialized centers can also be integrated into the Turkish healthcare system, because this care will have to go on for many years.
The Syrian wars marked an entire generation with disability and trauma. Psychological follow-up, rehabilitation and prosthetics requiring expensive long-term care give many refugees a fresh start, but many more are waiting.